the line between truly transformative innovation and fleeting trends is becoming harder to define. Today, we'll explore how we can better align AI development with real-world needs, human values, and long-term impact, rather than short-term hype. So we clearly have quite a panelist that are experts in AI and tech. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Namik. IBM has played a central role in both foundational AI research and enterprise solutions. How do you distinguish between a true leap in AI capabilities and something more hype than substance, especially in a business context?
Okay, thanks for this question. So as the name of our company implies, and its middle name, IBM Business Machines, we actually focus on developing technology for business processes. And that includes most of the largest enterprises in the world. And the AI is not an exception. So from, I would say, hundreds or if not thousands of engagements with our clients, we came up with some conclusions about how to really differentiate between hype and actual value. So by building, for example, the models, foundational models that are built for business, like our family of the models called Granite, we found out that actually when deploying AI and coming up with AI solutions, it makes sense to kind of rethink the business process. It makes almost kind of to start from scratch, rather than that just add AI to an existing ones. So this whole paradigm, we actually even have a name. We call it like an AI plus, rather than something plus AI. So when it comes to large language models, I believe that all of us are really witnesses that there was explosion of the large language models in the last couple of years. And with that explosion also came up lots of hype. Nothing strange, hype is common for IT solutions. And personally, I don't find it actually always bad. Because hype also creates, I would say, inspiration for people to think about, how to use particular technology, how to come up with some innovative solutions and everything else. But of course, hype also has some negative implications that should be avoided. So from our engagement with customers, our engagement with our business customers, large enterprises, we came up with or concluded actually that in a choice of a model, to avoid the hype, negative angles of the hype, one should really adhere to 4 principles, okay? And these principles are open, targeted, trusted, and empowering. So let me just quickly go through each of those. I will not hold you for too long. So open, like in open source, okay? Because we really believe, fairly, squarely, also judged by the past, what open source projects and software actually means for the innovation. It's good for 2 things. First of all, it opens up technology for very large constituency. It taps into the common, I would say, the competence of so many people all over the world. That's number 1. And number 2, it avoids locking into the proprietary technology of any particular company. I mean, just take a Linux, for example. I mean, Linux, which is basically powering every single multiscaler and so on. So model needs to be open, okay? Secondly, model need to be targeted. What I mean by that is that very large models, and many of them that we know right now, with hundreds of billions of parameters, are costly to build, are costly to run. In many cases, when you deploy them, they do not deliver really the latency that we need in a business situations. Just for some example, and by the way, I'm not picking up any particular company because this is kind of common for all of them. If you take like a Google Gemini Ultra, it costs to build $200 million, okay? If you take Meta 3.1, 405 billion parameters, it generated 9,000 tons of carbon dioxide. I mean, that just from an ethical perspective, sustainability, everything else, that can't be really good, okay? So what we believe is that a targeted model that are basically smaller and the targeting a specific situation, specific case, are much better for everything. It's much better for latency, much better for cost, much better for also customizing with your own data, because you will have to customize with your own data if you really want to get the best one. Then coming to the trusted, well, that's the one that probably all of you are using the large language models, in addition to just phenomenal eye-popping performance and capabilities. You have also probably stumbled also at the situation when these models so-called hallucinate. I don't necessarily like this term hallucinate, because somehow implies human characteristics too, because people hallucinate and not really the machines. But anyway, this is the one that we need to take. And empowering is that needs to really run anywhere. It needs to run on premise, on public cloud, on private cloud, and so on.
Definitely. And circling back to human-centric and also focusing on hype, Dr. Enrico, I'd like to ask you, your work at TII focuses on autonomous robotics, which is kind of way far away from human-centric and more focusing on technology and robots. And you're also focusing on applied AI research. How do you balance innovation with long-term scientific value and societal relevance in a field that attracts a lot of attention and sometimes hype? This word, everybody's just focusing on tech is the hype right now, but how do you manage to keep up with the hype, but at the same time have that long-term scientific value?
Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah, actually, first thing I think is important to strike a line between what is innovation, what is real innovation, what is hype. Real innovation means that is something that has a big validity, that has an impact, that has consequences that are positive for humanity, for their work, and so on. Whereas a hype is just an idea thrown without considering potential consequences. The other thing is the validation. Normally, innovation comes from a long time of research and development before reaching a certain level, whereas an hype is just, again, an idea thrown without having any backup scientifically. Then there is the timeline. Often, just as an example, the deep learning that became a hype in the 2010, 2012, when the machine won against the human in the AlphaGo game and so on, became a hype, but the studies started in the 80s. So it was more than 20 years, more than 30 years of research before reaching that point. So in this case, the timeline is very long, and it doesn't look like it's something that came out of nothing. The last thing is the risk. The risk of having something that comes from real innovation is usually very well pondered and considered during the studies through open discussion and so on, whereas the hype is not. However, let me also consider also the fact that hype might have some beneficial effects, though. In fact, creating the hype about some technologies in the end attracts talents, mobilizes funds, create interest around subjects that probably before were not considered. So it might become useful if used in the right way to foster innovation and to push beyond. Now, coming quickly to your question, what is needed to do and what we try to do in TII. When I arrived here, I worked in Italy and France and US before coming here, and I saw how difficult it is to have an impact on the society with the study you do as a researcher. It was always a question to answer in the form we filled when we asked for money for our research, but then the reality was that it was very hard to see the effect of what we studied in the reality. When I came here, one of the first meetings I had in TII with the leadership, I asked this question. They were asking us for societal impact. And they wanted us to solve a real problem. So I would say the first thing that we were pushed to do, and we are still pushed to do, is to have innovation with a purpose. We want to have use cases that solve real problems. So that, of course, this is applied research. It's not basic research where you play with numbers and with formulas and with math, with physics in order to get to you don't know where. But, of course, you open new waves. Here, what we are doing in TIA is applied research, so we need to have a purpose. The second thing is to ground what we do in scientific rigor. We need to be backed up by what exists, what is theoretically proven, what has been good, what has been shown good for already for some years. And the last thing is to consider the societal relevance. The thing I'm gonna do is our famous, motto that we respect is robot will harm human. Asimov said this is the first law. It shouldn't. So it would harm human, it will create inequalities, it will foster problems rather than solutions, then that is something probably not to pursue.
Definitely, and I think with the conversation of societal impact and societal value comes the importance of ethics, which goes back to Professor Paolo. As someone, unfortunately, we heard the news a few days ago that Pope Francis has passed away, and as someone who has met with him and advised him on AI ethics, you bring a rare moral and philosophical perspective to this space. How can ethical frameworks help us navigate the line between innovation and responsibility? And how do we avoid mediocrity dressed up as progress?
Thank you very much. This is a really core topic, because when we talk about technology, yes, we talk about something that works. But technology does not exist outside of a society. And the problem is what happens when a technology impacts a society. Let's start from the human condition 60,000 years ago, when we was in the cave. And for the first time, we take in our hands a clubsticks. Was it a tool to open up much more coconuts? Or was it a weapon to open up much more skulls? So there is no technological tool that cannot be used as a weapon, or there is no weapon that cannot convert it to be a tool. But there is another level of complexity. Because when you deploy a technology, especially the last AI technology that need an infrastructure, need an architecture inside the society, something new happens. Try to think what happened when you deploy a railway system, where you decide to make the stops. You are allowing someone to get the train, and you are denied to someone else to take the train. So every technology, when it is impacting a society, it works as a form of order, it works as a displacement of power. And it's here that ethics is needed. Ethics is not the solution, ethics is the question. Ethics of technology means questioning technology, because the different stakeholders can be part of such kind of discussion on the way in which such technology will produce a displacement of power and order in a society. It's not anymore matter of railroad, of steel, it's not anymore matter of concrete, but now the algorithm, with the power to work with data, can simply allow or deny access to service and to the rights to different kind of people. And because we are coming out, like we see this morning in other conference, from the software 1.0, in which you have data plus logic, and you have desired behavior, we are in a new season in which simple data plus desired behavior produce a logic. But it's not necessary that the logic that we get is what we intend to have. And we can have that the kind of software that we can deploy is producing a displacement of power that is not what we desire. So ethics is building up such kind of space in which such kind of conversation can happen. Ethics is simple the ability to have a recursive production quality system that simply change the behavior of this software power, computational power, let's call it that way, that is simple shaping the society today.
Definitely, and to focus more on societal benefit and how this technology benefits society, Ms. Nada, as someone leading future foresight at ADNOC, how do you ensure that innovation efforts, particularly those involving AI, are aligned with long-term societal benefits rather than just short-term gains? How can we ensure that whenever there's something that's of hype, specifically AI, it's not just short-term, but it's beneficial for society on a long-term basis?
Thank you, Dana, for this question. Just to set the stage a little bit, the industry that I'm coming from is a long-term investment cycle type of industry. It's the energy industry. And we tend to have this mindset when we invest. We take decisions that last the test of time. We need to make sure that what we invest in today is not necessarily only bring the value today, but also can bring the value for the future as well. And in ADNOC specifically, we look at AI, if we speak about AI specifically, we look at AI on 3 different ways. First of these ways is to embed purpose in our strategy. So when we deploy AI, we deploy the AI in every aspect of our value chain, from the control room all the way to the boardroom, with a purpose and understanding how this deployment is basically generates value, not necessarily as financial value, but also how it lowers the emissions, how basically drives efficiency, as well as how it ensures the safety of our people, given that we are speaking about one of the most risky operations in the world. Second is we do invest on long-term capability building, and this is very, very crucial. We are basically training our people to understand AI and how do they use AI to transform the way they do things. Mr. Namik, he said the AI plus. So I can relate to this because we can't deal with the AI as a tool that we bring and embed. We have to look at it in a way that it transforms domains and it transforms the way we do things. And we will not be able to do this, either for the short term or the long term, without really investing in building the right capability, whether in ADNOC as an organization or in the community in general. We have introduced programs for elevating the capability and understanding of the basics of AI and fundamentals for more than 40,000 employees. We were very determined and very committed last year to make all of our employees understand what does AI mean and what it can do, what it cannot do. Funny, I mean, I always say this sentence, people at some point approaching me thinking that AI will solve every single problem they face. So we had to do this training for everybody. We invested in training the whole C-suite, the whole management line on what AI, the fundamental of it, examples of where AI is deployed in other industries that generate the value they are expecting. In the oil and gas industry, we give them example, make it relevant to them. We push the boundaries. We trained everybody on generative AI. More than 25,000 employees were trained on that. It increased the adoption of generative AI 9 times in the organization. And also we went beyond, we trained 150 engineers today, aiming to 600 engineers to be specialized in AI, because your engineers tend to actually work with the data of the oil and gas, and they understand it. So it just makes sense that we invest in them and build their capability to be able to solve the problems of today and the challenges of the future. We invested as well in sending 15 of our UAE nationals to the top universities in the world to be trained and to be actually pursue their graduate studies in artificial intelligence. So we are actually very committed in building the capabilities of our employees as well as the community to basically be part of this transformation journey. The last part, the last thing that we are focused on is supporting the ecosystem of technology in the UAE. We have been very focused in investing and collaborating with others in the ecosystem. We have announced a solution with AIQ, Foresight, and Microsoft on building the first agentic AI solution for the energy industry in the world. That today it has impacted multiple of our workflows. One of them is interpreting seismic information for 7,000 cubic kilometers that used to take months, and today it takes weeks. So innovation is not a discussion for the race that basically bring a short-term advantage. I think it's a responsibility to shape the way we do things, not only for energy industry, for our communities, and for the generations to come.
Definitely, and when we were speaking about investment and relevance, I saw Mr. Maurice just nodding. I'm curious to know how important, as a senior manager, how important is it to invest in your employees and train them about this evolving sector? You know, AI is not just ChatGPT or a large language model. It's much more beyond than that. And it's not even a hype. It's been there for years. It's not just something new. It's been there since the 90s. So I'm curious to know, how important is it to train and invest?
Thank you very much, Dana, for the question. I think before AI it used to be called machine learning, before machine learning used to be called algorithms, and before that was coding, right? And previously I used to work for a hedge fund, and systematic trend following funds, that's what they do, is algorithmic trading through various statistics of past information to predict the potential future, which is more or less what the same basis of we have. What's amazing about technology is a never-ending story. There's always something that comes out. You will always have hypes and you will always have lows, but the aim is that as an individual, it is what do you do for yourself to keep pushing yourself to learn and move with where the world is. So importance of learning is key. And that is in any industry. But obviously because we're in the this huge tsunami wave of what AI is doing, because blockchain was a big wave, but not many consumers were able to play with it. AI is much easily adaptable with people playing with ChatGPT. Why is it important for people to utilize it? And not only individuals, because we deal with a lot of startups to unicorns and decacorns. Everybody's utilizing it. It's important to optimize on efficiency because even investors are asking, are you AI capable? What are you doing to optimize your costs? Or what are you doing to optimize the potential of revenue generation that you're looking to do? So it's not only on an individual basis, but also goes into the startups who are starting new businesses to the corporates and the decacorns that are already there. Because also there's this race to the first unicorn single owner and single employee. There's that race that how can we reach to that level where it's a unicorn is built by one individual utilizing the whole AI ecosystem. There's a lot of hype that comes around the world. The key factor that a lot of us are alluding to is the trust. Do you trust the system? Do you trust that an individual to use it so that you can be able to learn? Or are there places around the city and around the world where you can feel like, okay, you know what? I am in a safe space, I can test, I can put some information, learn what it is to do. And we do recommend everybody from all around the world that we meet is to utilize it. It is good to use for the growth of the individual, from the employees to the businesses, because it is an activity you cannot not have anymore. Because the showcases of efficiency has been evident, but it's not a blanket statement, right? It doesn't mean you have to use GPT for everything. It could be using specific LLMs that are more small to optimize your element versus just using what the major trend is. So it is important not only for individuals, but also for startups and corporates and businesses that we meet on a daily basis.
Definitely. And going back to the topic of trust, Dr. Enrico, I've worked or covered a lot of topics related to TII. I'm a big fan of TII as well, and especially the work that you're doing in terms of autonomous robotics. Recently, I think the drones as well was something out of this world. But as it enters public and physical spaces, there is this feeling of, I don't want to use the word paranoia, but there is the paranoia. How do you assess potential unattended consequences regarding this robotics entering public and private spaces?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's very relevant for what we actually do. So first of all, let me just make some example of unintended consequences, just to understand what is that can happen, and happened actually in some cases in the past, to understand what could have been done and how we could have been better at understanding what would happen. So examples are robots, delivery robots in US, in some cities in Europe, that were blocking the pathway on sidewalks, especially for impaired people, and creating a problem. We have the privacy problems, like, for example, drones used for surveillance of areas that are sensitive, that somehow can see around and see even spaces that are not necessarily needed to be seen. Or even the Roomba vacuum that, in order to improve the model and understand better the furniture and the chairs and the sofas, used to send data to improve the main model and then get the results of the distributed action that is needed to be done. Other potential unintended consequences, a robot used in assembly chain or in delivery warehouse that put human at the level of increase the performance in order to be at the same level of the robot or to cooperate with the robot on some tasks, and expose the humans to burnout and to stress or injuries and so on, as well as the use, for example, of exoskeleton that creates, it alleviates some problem and creates other problems somewhere else. So these are all unintended consequences. Clearly, the intention was not to make trouble, but it was not taught enough. I think I will go back to what Paolo was saying before. We need open discussion about technology. We need, besides the hype, to go into it, explore, understand, involve stakeholders, and have a public discussion on some technologies, even those that seems the most ingenious and not really harmful, because the objective is to produce things that alleviate, help, support, heal, rather than create more trouble. So I would say regulatory sandboxes where it's possible to see the technology in operation and understand which will be the consequences. About this, for example, in TII we are working with a lab in Harvard that looks at the societal impact of technology and can prevent some of the consequences and understand where we can act already while we develop the products and where we need to go into the effect and study what's happening there. And then transparency and explainability. It's very hard, especially with AI. There is a full research stream on explainability. How did AI chose that thing instead of another thing? Explain the answer is something that is studied and is very needed, not only for AI, but especially for robotics, once we enter in the cyber-physical space and interact with humans around.
Definitely. And to interact with humans, of course, we need to know the concept behind defining what good AI means. Mr. Namik, I want to ask you, should the AI community work towards a universal framework to what does it mean to have a good AI? Or is this something that must be defined first locally and culturally?
So, as usual with those kind of things and dilemmas, there are two schools of thought, right? The one argues that universal platform brings global consistency. Okay. The other one says that local, especially cultural context, needs to be taken into account. Well, that also has its merits. The main argument of those that are coming up with a universal platform, and to those, for example, belongs to organizations like UNESCO, they argue that values like human rights, like fairness, like accountability, like transparency, and so on, are kind of common values, and should be at least common values. And if adhered to, they should prevent things that artificial intelligence definitely can amplify, negative things, like, for example, disinformation campaigns, deep fakes, and some argue even, let's say, building up autonomous weapons and all those kind of things. Okay, well, obviously, lots of merits here. On the other hand, those that are promoting kind of local focus on building and those rules and everything else, argue also rightfully that there are lots of local and especially, as I say, cultural aspects that needs to be taken into account in order, at least to the people in that localized area, actually to accept it, right? Not to be strange to them. But for example, take an example of, let's say, healthcare advice or something like that, well, that healthcare advice absolutely needs to take into account dietary customs in that particular country, okay? And then there's also one angle in that argument which says that we should really try to avoid something that, unfortunately, we've been plagued with, which is basically, I would call that cultural imperialism, okay? Which is basically enforcing some set of values that, I will call it global north, and usually kind of is associated with. So what I would say that both of these kind of have merit, and probably the right way is some kind of hybrid, where the localized, customized, actually, I would say rules and adherence should be done, but at the same time amplified with some guardrails which are common and kind of crossing borders, as I said, like human rights and everything else.
Definitely. This is quite an interesting concept that you said. You said cultural imperialism, and which is enforcing other people's culture on others. Following to Professor Paolo, I'm actually curious, this is related to cultural imperialism. Is a shared ethical foundation for AI development possible across cultures, or are national values always going to lead the way?
Well, this is one of the core questions when you talk about ethics, you know. There is an ethics or there are multiple ethics? Well, the answer, it depends on what do you mean when you say ethics, you know, because one element that is simple shaping ethics are values. And values are plural, different, personal, and has to be, you know. In my life, I didn't take as the first value to get married. Someone else could be the first values of his life. So we cannot universalize a list of values and say this will be applied to everyone. So it's not the values, the things that we can universalize. Move to other ethical elements. We have norms. Can we universalize norms? Well, there are some nice attempts, but the bottom line is, you know, a norm is a way to protect the values. So if life is a value, don't kill is a norm that would like to protect that values. But if values are variable, norms should have a certain degree of variability in society. So we neither universalize norms. Should we surrender to that? Well, we have another element that we can use in ethics, and the element are principle. Well, what is a principle? Well, supposing that we have an autonomous driving car. If I say, in an unavoidable situation of an accident, should the car try to minimize the damages? Well, that is a principle. And I think that every one of us is agreeing on the idea that minimizing the damage, wherever you are, if you are the driver, if you are someone that walks on the street, is the best workable solution. Well, with principle, we have something that we can universalize. So when we talk about global ethics, we are talking about a minimum set of principles that could be workable cross-country. What we have not to expect, that ethics will be able to solve every kind of problem. Ethics is a soft law. Then, there is also a space for a specificity of the ethics, yes. So we have to understand that ethics in one way as a principle could be universal, but as a value could be the identity of a group and has to be the identity of a group. What is the role of such kind of ethics? Well, that ethics will be everything that will be enforceable by law. One famous judge, Lord Malton, was used to say in his commendatory speech, ethical is everything that is enforceable by law. On the sinking Titanic, when someone shouts, first women and kids, and they allow first women and kids to go, that was ethics. It's not the law, but this is the expression of a culture of a group. So we have to look at some core element that we have to globalize, and some specific element that has to be arise locally and express the value of the local group.
Definitely. And speaking of, again, ethics, Mr. Maurice, you work in the region as well, and you are Arab. I am curious to know, what do you define ethical usage of such technology, and where do we draw the line with this type of technology?
So the key factor with AI is all about data, right? The source of the data and what is the data that is being fed for the information that you're utilizing. So from even a corporation, if you're looking to do some kind of business matchmaking, or you want to introduce one person to the other, the source of company A and what they are looking for, who are they, is important to understand that source. And then the other counterparty, what are they looking for and what are they needing, understanding that source. Was that source filled out by a random person? Was it filled out by the right department? Was it filled out correctly? Did they incorrectly put certain information? And the other part, were they just lying on this, saying, I am a billion-dollar company, when actually they're just a startup because it's a form that they filled out. So the question to look at is data, because the industry says it, junk in, junk out. So it is important that when we are doing our matchmaking and opportunities and meeting these corporates and investors and governments and all of those entities, to say, you know, what are you looking for? How can we be of help? And asking them directly and asking the information to be filled out the same way across the board. Because if one person fills out one information and then I hear it one way and then another colleague hears it another way, there's always that hearsay or if and or but kind of situation. But if you create a structure where everybody has the same information inputted, you create a source of trust. You know that that person it was entered manually or it came from extra sources, so that allows the AI to be utilized even more. So the question on ethics and even in business is, where is the source coming from, and ensuring, you know, that as a business, as an individual, the source is unified, or the source is allowed people to see the multiple sources to then be able to come and say which is the right one. But currently, you know, there are information coming from biases but yet there's a lot of other information out there, and that's where we need to be able to leverage on.
1000%. I think what you mentioned is super important. I've interviewed executives. I've actually visited corporate or big giant techs to visit and see their security and accountability centers. And this is something I always mention, which is who's inputting the data. Who is inputting the data? Because at the end of the day, whatever the AI is providing, someone's inputting that data, and that person can be biased themselves. So it's such an important topic that not a lot of people speak about, because the AI, right, can be biased, but it's because the person who built it themselves are biased as well. Ms. Nada, as someone who's tasked with imagining future scenarios for an energy giant, how do you define what good AI is and what it looks like in the context of national development, sustainability, and resilience?
The definition of good AI, I'll limit it a little bit into the business context, because in the last year I was very focused on basically deploying AI in the context of the energy systems. And the definition of a good AI in this case is the solution that basically serve purpose and progress. We have been very focused on basically identifying the use cases and understanding where AI can really create value in the whole entire value chain and the different aspects of this energy system. Whether it is accelerating, speeding up some of the critical processes, or lowering emissions, or even making sure that our operation is safe. In ADNOC specifically, we look at AI from two different aspects: AI for energy and energy for AI. On one hand, AI is embedded in the energy system to basically help us in producing, transporting, and use the energy in a way that is a smart, cleaner, and reliable and secure type of energy. We have been deploying AI for certain purposes. For example, reduce the flaring, eliminating the methane emission, using computer vision to ensure that the safety of our people in very risky operations such as drilling, for example. And on the other hand, we are also looking at energy for AI, where we are investing in the energy systems that are powering the AI era, and by basically introducing reliable source of energy for data centers or even the digital infrastructure that is basically linked to it. So I would say the good AI, in my opinion, we are basically representing it from a practical sense. And it is the smart, scalable, and an AI that basically serves common goals, I would say.
Definitely, and such important insights from each and every one of you. My last question is actually to the entire panelists. We did talk about a framework for AI, and because each person comes from a different background, I want to know, what is one principle or value you believe must define AI development moving forward? Ms. Nada, I'll start with you.
I have two, but I would choose one for the sake of time. We call it the and approach. So when we design AI, I mean, there are a lot of trade-offs in the world. And we need just to embrace the mindset of and when we design AI. We can design AI that can serve purpose and progress, that can serve economic value and sustainability and sustainable responsibility. We can design AI that is scalable and inclusive. And also we can design AI that brings efficiency and equity. So I think we just need to always design it in a way that is the best for the world.
Definitely. Mr. Maurice?
For me, it's going to be, having dealt with, as a chamber of digital economy, we deal with so many businesses on a daily basis, locally, internationally, and if there's one word, we are a great facilitator to connect individuals and give the lay of the land. And if there's an underlying to that facilitation, it's trust. Trusting the information of where it is coming from, speaking and knowing that data is accurate, to be able to then provide the information back to the person accurately and have that individual or to be able to access in what it is. So for me, trust of this data source is very fundamental to having a practical AI. I like that wording versus good AI, practical AI.
Dr. Enrico?
Yeah, from my side, let's say from the researcher point of view, probably I've been involved in many discussions in which it was very easy to speculate on the source of information or the algorithms behind or the bias that could have had and so on. And it's sometimes very hard, even with technical data, to show that what the machine responded was actually the fruit of something that didn't have any intended consequences, that was done in a practical way, that was done. So I would say probably it's transparency, being able to have an automated report on what that thing, where that thing came from, where that answer was taken, how it has been combined with other elements, how it has been built, and so on, so that I will say we'll try to expose much less to fake news, to fake ideas, and to propagation of, let's say, falsities about technologies.
Completely agree. Professor Paolo?
Well, just to not repeat transparency, I would like to say trustability in an engineer sense. When you are an engineer and you buy steel, you know that steel has some kind of property and quality that allow you to apply for something and not for something else. The same things has to happen to algorithms, and if you use data sets, you need some kind of data sheets that in some way give you the trustability of the machine. So the around that is something that make the system workable for some kind of solution.
One word, openness. In few more words, make GenAI, especially large language models, open source, because the risk of abuse or misuse of AI can be significantly reduced if there are no one or couple of parties and players that monopolize and control this particular field. I was just reading, in preparation for this, I was reading United Arab Emirates' strategic document on a national strategy for AI 2031. And what strikes me there is something that dominates, which says that we want not only to use AI, we actually want to build it as well. And I believe the best way to do that is to do it in an open source fashion.
Definitely. So the conclusion is trust open source. As long as it's open, transparent, and trust, that's how good AI can be created. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This was a very insightful panel. Thank you all for attending as well.